Cody Benjamin covers the NFL for CBS Sports. You can follow him on X, on Twitter, at Cody J. Benjamin. Cody is on with us because I read Cody's column yesterday ranking the quarterbacks, the projected starting quarterbacks in the NFL, 1 through 32 post-draft. And his number one quarterback in the NFL, Jayden Daniels. So, Cody, how'd you arrive at Jayden at number one?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. You know, it's funny, we get some lulls in the NFL offseason, not many, but there are some where you don't hear a lot. I mean, there's not a ton of chatter. As soon as any quarterback power ranking goes out, emails, Twitter posts, people will even find me on LinkedIn to criticize whatever order they don't like. But with Jayden Daniels, I mean, everyone knows, I guess, you know, how magical the rookie season was. And these rankings are always a combination. It's not an exact – it's a tricky science. You know, you're trying to weigh current status with future outlook, with, you know, past experience. And I just have a hard time, you know, right now as we stand going into 2025, is Patrick Mahomes more reliable? Sure. Did Jaylen Herz just win a Super Bowl? Absolutely. You know, would I maybe rather take Joe Burrow as a pure pocket passer? Maybe, yeah. But I think you just look at the entire quarterback landscape. I think it's hard to find a quarterback who has as much promise, as much foundational support. You look at what Washington did to help him this offseason. And yes, we just saw last year, C.J. Stroud endured a certain sophomore slump. So Daniels might not be immune to that. But right now, as we stand, I just think it's hard to find a guy who's drawing more, who's shown much, more promise than he has. And I just think that the bar is set so high for him this year. People want him to he was on the doorstep of a Super Bowl in year one. And so I don't see it as that outrageous.
Yeah, not only was he, 60 minutes away from the Super Bowl, the reason they were 60 minutes away from the Super Bowl was him more than anything else. I mean, you'd have to count 12 spots to get to whatever number 2 was after him. You're right, by the way. This is what I always refer to as, power rankings and list season, which, a lot of that sparks a lot of fun conversation. Something you wrote that I actually I thought it was an interesting way that you put it. You wrote, you'd be hard-pressed to find an NFL team that wouldn't hurry to claim him as its quarterback of the present and future, contenders included. So let's play this game. What teams in the NFL wouldn't swap quarterbacks?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, because again, with these rankings, you're trying to kind of play both sides where it's very hard to separate these quarterbacks from their situation, right? I mean, would Jared Goff be in the top 10 if he didn't have Detroit set up? If he was with, for example, I'm just trying to think of a bottom of the barrel. If he were with the Colts or the Browns, I don't think Jared Goff would be in the top 10 probably. And so you're looking at there's a very select few. And I think you probably see it in the top 6 there. So on that list, we've got in the top 6, Jayden Daniels, Jaylen Herz, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes. I mean, those are the names where I think it would be, those teams, you could see it either way. The Eagles, look, Jaylen Herz deserves a lot of respect he did take a back seat for the Eagles Super Bowl run, but he answered when he was needed, he answered. And so I don't think you can take anything away from Jaylen Herz. And Eagles fans wouldn't admit this probably after a Super Bowl win. But if you were the Eagles and you could keep everything else about the Eagles, but you could swap in Jayden Daniels for Jaylen Herz, a younger quarterback, a little more spry quarterback, a guy who has shown equal probably amount of poise at the NFL level, granted on a small sample size. I just think even that could be, you could make a case where the Eagles, if you put truth serum in their drinks, they might say, yeah, we like if we had our choice for the long term, we might rather take Jayden Daniels. And I don't think that's crazy. Again, if after 3 more years we've seen a stark regression from Jayden Daniels, well, then the rankings will reflect that. But right now, I just think, yeah, maybe Burrow, Hurts, Jackson, Allen, Mahomes. Those are kind of the only guys that I think would probably stand a chance in that kind of a scenario.
I think the Eagles is a no-brainer. I mean, by the way, I would imagine that some of the critique was having Jaylen Herz number 2, because that was the surprise for me. Although you wrote something that I totally agree with, and that is his instincts, toughness, downfield touch, rugged mobility all show up in the clutch. That is an absolute truth with Jaylen Herz. He has played his best football in the biggest games that he's been involved in. Go back to the Super Bowl that they lost to the Chiefs. He may have been the best player on the field in that game. Yeah. But I looked at it this way. I think there are 2 quarterbacks and 2 quarterback situations in the NFL that without question teams would never decide to swap with Washington. I think Kansas City and Buffalo, Mahomes and Allen. I look at Burrow and I think they wouldn't want to do it, but his injury history might make them consider it. I look at Lamar, Cody, and I'm like, I don't know that they'd want to do it, but his postseason, up and down, to say it kindly, might be, a concern moving forward. By the way, some of his injury history as well. Jayden just had the most amazing season, and by the way, played his best in their biggest games. I'm not sure that any team wouldn't seriously consider it, with the exception of Kansas City and Buffalo.
Yeah, and I think you hit on it a little bit that, with some of these guys, you can pick and choose. You go down the list of starting quarterbacks. Some guys get their ranking because of trustworthiness. Some guys get it because of just physical gifts. I think of like a Justin Herbert, where I can never quite, bring myself to drop him out of the top 15, just because the numbers always look pretty good. He just came off a year where he threw 3 picks. He's the total physical package, but yet he has no, you would clearly, already after 1 year, you clearly would give Jayden Daniels the advantage in terms of this guy's just unflappable. In high pressure moments, you already trust that. And so some guys have the gifts, some guys have that it factor. Jayden Daniels, again, 1 year, that's the preface, but he has both. And so with Lamar, Lamar has been great. He has the gifts. He's shown it year after year. But that it factor, when it counts, is still an asterisk with him.
No doubt.
Maybe that just is a product of playing in the same conference as Patrick Mahomes. But guess what? Jayden Daniels played in the same conference as Jaylen Herz last year, as Matthew Stafford at whatever. And he ended up, like you said, close to the Super Bowl. So, yeah, I think Washington fans should this is the time to relish it. I mean, until Jayden Daniels shows us otherwise, and that may be, well, he's up there.
Yeah, I think your point, about it's just 1 year actually works for the question, right? Like, would you swap? Because there's so much that is unrealized, and what you saw in 1 year was so unusual. Like, we've talked about this since the season ended, where, people have said, well, look at CJ Stroud's sophomore slump year. And I'm like, the two aren't even comparable. CJ Stroud's rookie year was a distant second to Jayden's rookie year. Like, it's hard to envision him improving or needing to improve in areas. And this isn't just Homer talk. It's just true. Like, there isn't anything he did last year where you're like, if he were to improve next year, you would say, oh, thank God he improved that. Because he wasn't any good at doing that last year. It's hard to come up with it. They've mentioned things like footwork and decision-making, but it would be as much about the unrealized based on what they think he might become, which might make some teams, a Cincinnati or, a Green Bay with a Jordan Love, like lots of potential, but say, yeah, but this guy's going to be better. I think it's an interesting way to look at it. But so where was the pushback primarily from people on your list?
Oh, I mean, you name it. Not many. You never get the "I love this list" comment. I never.
You mean
So I think.
Washington fans weren't thrilled?
Oh, sure. I mean, but I still think it's much easier to yell loudly about something you're
Sure.
unhappy about. So
Yeah.
I think always with the rookies and guys who haven't played it down like JJ McCarthy. I mean, that's going to get some pushback because yes, we could just throw Cam Ward at 32 because he's never played. But I just again, it's kind of that as we sit here right now, would I rather bet on the unknown of Cam Ward or the known of Joe Flacco? Like I'm going to take Cam Ward in that scenario. And so there's a little pushback about having, JJ McCarthy ahead of Bryce Young. I think the Burrow, the Lamar, there's a constant debate amongst, the Ravens, Bills, Bengals fans about how those three kind of stack up. And even though at the end of the day, they all fall short to Mahomes when it counts, I think there's constantly some bickering kind of about, well, Lamar should be ahead of Burrow. He beat him in the regular season and all that. So in my mind, yes, obviously these rankings are meant to, get people talking about where they rank. But to me, the more important thing is not so much the actual number, like you're 1 or you're 3 or you're 7. It's what group are you in? Are you in the top 10 there? Are you, because, Jayden Daniels, Hertz, like those are the guys you just know are the upper echelon there. Where if you're between 17 and 25, so many of those guys are interchangeable. And so, I think you could, any city who wasn't number 1 is pushing back.
I think we have these conversations every year, sometimes during the season, the quarterback tiers or, the rankings. And, I think there have been years recently where the list has been much deeper, but we had a lot of retirements, whether it was, Brady or Rivers or, I'm Breeze, in the last 5-6 years, we've had some retirements of all-time greats. We've had Aaron Rodgers kind of take a step back. I'll ask you about that in a moment. But I think that now the conversation of like the top 5 or 6 is like, I think I don't know that I actually think Jaylen Herz at times is very underrated. I don't know that I'd put him in that elite category, but I think, Mahomes and Allen and Jackson and Burrow and Jayden are in that category. And then it's like there's a lot of in the next 10 there you could go with almost anything. I think so. I think the position. I guess the question, because I'm just rambling here. The question is, do you think the position is deep compared to previous years?
Well, I think that you're onto something with. There is that group of guys that they're kind of just transcendent talents, and it's very hard to find them. Everyone's trying. Right. But the Jayden Daniels, the guys who just can do things that not others can do, and are probably going to elevate any team they're on. And even that's only to a degree, because I put in Joe Burrow's blurb. The last 2 years of his starts, they're just 14 and 13, and right. So that's a top 3 quarterback according to that ranking. And yet, we should see with the Eagles run this last year too, that you could even have an elite whatever you want to call Jaylen Herz, a really good quarterback, a championship, a clutch quarterback. You could have that. But I think that we've also seen in the Joe Burrow record, in the Super Bowl run by the Eagles, it isn't always all about the quarterback either. Like we love to have these conversations. It's much easier path to a Super Bowl win with an elite quarterback, a transcendent talent. But you also it's a team sport. We have to always remind ourselves of that every single year. So much of this comes down to supporting cast. Look at those top teams: Washington, Philadelphia on the quarterback rankings list, Cincy, Baltimore, Buffalo, Kansas City, the Rams, the Packers. I mean, most of those teams have playoff caliber supporting cast, playoff caliber head coaches. So that it's obviously a package deal. As far as you're saying, is it deeper? I just think it's kind of a pick your poison. What kind of a quarterback do you want? After that first tier, Jared Goff, he's not going to move with his legs. If you prefer a pure old school pocket passer, that's your guy. Brock Purdy, if you want a point guard who can move a little bit more, that's him. Baker Mayfield, you want a quarterback who's going to truck a linebacker in the open field, that's your guy. I think it's kind of a pick your poison in terms of who matches well with your coordinator, with your talent, with the direction of your team.